Greetings, Tema Shalom, back for Parashat Shavua. This week we are in Parashat Eikev, still in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, verse 12 through chapter 11, 25. We are continuing with the second discourse, the second long speech, the great oration of Moses. We are in a section that continues with idolatry. Then it comes to the section of what they call the good life. This is what happens if Israel follows God's will and does what God asks of them. Then they will have land to inherit and all of the wonderful, wonderful things. We are reminded that the Israelites were a stiff necked people as they continued to argue and fight against Moses and God through their history, and what is going to happen if they continue to be stiff-necked, or if they turn around and do what they're supposed to do, and then they get to live in this good land of the land of Canaan or the land of Israel. So with regards to the dealing with idolatry, basically we are not allowed to worship animals of any kind or any kind of idol that is. We're not allowed to worship anything really, any item or object. This goes back to the Ten Commandments and the golden calf, and we God does not want us to be influenced by the people that we are going to be taking over their land, and following the laws of the idolatry of that they worshipped. And then we continue with talking about the good life. This is, you shall faithfully observe all the instruction that I enjoin upon you today, that you may thrive and increase and be able to possess the land that the Eternal promised on oath to your fathers. Remember the long way that the Eternal, your God, has made you travel in the wilderness these past 40 years in order to test you by hardships, to learn what was in your hearts, whether you would keep the divine commandments or not. And then there's a reminder of all the hardships that God brought upon us. But it concludes with, for the Eternal your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron and from whose hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to the Eternal your God for the good land given to you. But don't forget God, and don't forget, and then all of a sudden begin to fail to keep the divine commandments. Because if you do, you know what happens. You've seen it in your past, and you know it can happen again. And so there's the continuation of the story of the bringing down of the Ten Commandments, and then Moses seeing that they had sinned with the golden calf, and Moses throwing down the Ten Commandments in anger and going up and getting two more tablets of Ten Commandments, and pleading with God to not destroy the people. Time and time again, Moses reminds them, again you provoked the Eternal, again you argued, again this bad stuff happened. But look what happens when you do good, when you do well, when you listen to God and you follow the commandments. Then we get to chapter 10, verse 12. And now, O Israel, what does the Eternal your God demand of you? Only this, to revere the Eternal your God, to walk only in divine paths, to love and to serve the Eternal your God with all your heart and soul, keeping the Eternal's commandments and laws which I enjoin upon you today for your good. What happens if you follow all these commandments and do all these things that God has asked you to do? If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Eternal your God and serving God with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. I will also provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. Take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them, for the Eternal's anger will flare up against you, shutting up the sky so there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce. And you will soon perish from the good land that the Eternal is assigning to you. And then at the end, if then you faithfully keep all this instruction that I command you, the Eternal will dislodge before you all these nations. You will dispossess nations greater and more numerous than you. Every spot on which your foot treads shall be yours. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness to the Lebanon, and from the river, the Euphrates, to the western sea. No one shall stand up to you. The Eternal your God will put the dread and the fear of you over the whole land in which you set foot, as promised. Pretty good thing to have, but we have to remember to keep the commandments and do as God commanded, as God has asked us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Shabbat Shalom.